Shane is our founder and head of product. And we have presented here twice before, way back in the very earliest days. And then we did an update maybe 5 to 6 months ago, something like that. We're not really interested in going through like all of what we do, but we thought we'd give you a little, for those of you who don't know us, a little bit of information about our business, and then have a conversation about transitioning from bootstrapping into, what's our next stage called?
Expansion.
Yes, into our expansion phase, all right? And I'm busy bootstrapping, so I don't know the next part yet. But, you know, to talk about that and talk about what that process means for businesses and the struggles of that, is that something that you'd be interested in doing this morning?
Sure.
That work for people? Okay, real good. Feel free to jump in at any point, okay? And take it away, Shane.
All right. Well, I'll frame kind of where we've been, where we are, and then maybe we can kind of roll into more of a conversation, including Bill here, about where we're headed and some of the opportunities and challenges that we've seen and where we're at. So, Project Foundry, we've recently kind of, this is part of our transition, is to really kind of pinpoint what we're about, what we're focused on in a broad enough way that is as inclusive of the services and the products that we want to grow into beyond the existing platform. At the same time, it needs to be something that we can talk about both in the marketplace and with investors, etc. So our new, I guess, promise to the world, if you will, and description of what we are is we are about open workflows for deeper learning. And so we want that to be intentional in terms of evoking, well, what does that mean? But that's one piece of talking about moving from bootstrap to seed, from seed round to Series A, is in terms of really having clarity in terms of your larger purpose, what you're trying to do, your why. And so that has been a process that we've been going through. And it's one of those things where it's easier to write a long letter than it is to write a concise little one, right? And so that's been an interesting process as we transition. So generally that's what we are. We are a software as a service, but we also have consulting and training around doing deeper learning that allows learners to be the center of that equation. So rather than sitting and listening all the time, 8 hours a day going to school, it's more about actively doing and working with people that are in those professions and doing things that are interesting to your community as a way to learn, whether it be biology or whether it be entrepreneurship. So does that kind of generally cover who we are? You guys feeling good about that? For those that don't know us, maybe everybody does. But so
is this the website?
This is our website, our product website. And so we've also kind of reframed how we're showing up in the marketplace. And so another aspect of our transition is where we began was very grassroots. I would go, there was these networks of educators that were doing this kind of project-based learning. And at the time, these names were kind of fragmented, so there was project-based, there was problem-based, there was all these kind of segments in the market. And what's kind of evolved, and the opportunity in the market now, is much more not just one label. So the other thing we've done in terms of our marketing is we've had to kind of stand back and understand the different levers, but not kind of get tagged to too much one little segment. And that's different than when we were bootstrapping, where we wanted to be real specific, laserly. But early on that's helpful. As you grow and expand, if you're too specific, you become this cute little thing. Right? It's like, oh, well, that's nice, but who's going to, that's not going to scale to something. So, to summarize that key concept is one of the big things is we've transitioned our mindset in terms of what we're about, where we are in the marketplace. And maybe I'll just talk to some of our financing, how that's changed, and in terms of how our team has changed in terms of attracting talent. So when I started, the guy that put the first money in, he owned a marina in Lake Geneva, and didn't have an educational background, but was an entrepreneur, and that got us off and running. And the next people we got in weren't necessarily value-added investors. you know, our seed round that we're kind of coming out of now. We've raised almost $1.25 million. You know, that has involved different value-added investors, including people like Generator, because we were part of the Generator program. Bill and Camille, who have expertise, interest in education, as well as Bill with his healthcare background, which there's a lot of parallels in the industry, and he's taken a company public, so there's some financing experience there. So the transition from bootstrap to kind of this Series A that we're entering really involves a little bit more strategic investors than, say, what it took to get us here. And that's different too, because you know there's kind of different ways you need to express what you're doing, which helps you be more concise, but at the same time makes you pick your favorite babies, it feels like sometimes, and makes you simplify things to a way that just feels like doesn't accurately represent the opportunity in the market. So that's been an interesting piece. And then the last thing I'll say, and then maybe open it up to some questions, is just in terms of our team dynamic. You know, when we've been bootstrapping, you know, for a while, more than we care to admit, but when you're bootstrapping, you kind of do look out far and think what you want to do, and you have to be, you know, mindful of your vision. At the same time, there is this reality that you need to get stuff done. And sometimes how you get stuff done in the short term isn't maybe necessarily what you need to do to scale. And so what we're doing now that we've got some of our key people in place is, you know, kind of the looking forward, taking a full swing of the bat to say, well, what do we really need to accelerate, not just kind of moderately increase revenue. And that can be a scary feat from when you're so used to bootstrapping, where you almost don't have that imagination almost anymore to be going, geez, well, I really need this QA person, otherwise my personal time is going to be stuck up till 1 o'clock last night. This happens to be maybe a real example. Testing our next sprint, which we want to get out weekly every Thursday. And so, you know, being able to put yourself in a mindset that kind of lives in the reality that you still got to get your feet done. But also, you need to have the imagination to what is it going to take. And sometimes that means some really kind of tough conversations about challenging how things have been. And that's because the market's changing. That's because your portfolio of products and services is going to change. So you need to kind of be morphing that. And, you know, I've found that sometimes coming out of the bootstrap hangover can be the thing that is your own worst enemy in terms of being able to paint a picture of where you're going, even though you might be thinking it, to be able to articulate it in a way that doesn't kind of get you caught in the past. So those are some few things that, you know, just trying to answer this bootstrap to financing.
Okay, so I will present a different viewpoint, but it's the same thing, okay?
Can I just make sure we got a point of clarity? So you've used the word bootstrap a lot, but you also talked about raising funding early on that would have, some people would consider that not bootstrapping. So would you consider bootstrapping just running on revenues?
And just barely, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things it does is it does give you the discipline to actually not necessarily overbill and answer questions of real customers, okay? There are certainly models out there of how to finance businesses like this, not necessarily around here, but on the West Coast, for example, where it's done as a concept, a lot of money's put in, and the idea is you'll figure it out sometime, okay? I don't want to oversimplify it, but there's a lot of that goes on. We were just talking about that in our Founders Club thing this morning, where we're based here in the middle of the country where value matters, okay? And on the other hand, it also makes it difficult, but in the bootstrapping mode, the one thing it does for you is it gives you discipline to actually do what needs to be done and not do a lot of other stuff that doesn't need to be done. And so part of the transition is how do you break out of that? Not that you should do things that don't need to be done, but how do you break out to really planning, okay, what kind of people do we want to put on? Well, the kind of people you have in bootstrapping mode in the company are people who are very talented but do everything. Well, as you get bigger, you can't have that happen, or you're gonna have 100 people running all over each other, tripping, and actually it gets worse. It's like Brownian motion, and ductus is generated in the gas as it gets hotter, and a lot of companies will fall on their face during this period of time because they don't know how to make the transition. In our particular case, and that's why I guess Shane mentioned about healthcare, which I've been in with Merge Healthcare. Sometimes you have to be at the right place at the right time, and have done the homework. And that certainly was true with Merge. It took 10 years for us all of a sudden to be overnight heroes and sensations, partly because markets that we've chosen, Shane has chosen, I chose, and now joining Shane 4 years ago, that we've chosen to really focus on are things where there's a long transition before everything is right, okay? And I saw it emerge, and once that happened and we were able to kind of change the people we had on board, get some people who actually were people who like this, okay, we gotta ship this stuff, what do we do? Not that we don't do that, but when you're doing all kinds of stuff, you do the minimum to get by. When you have, literally tens of thousands of people we've served and a whole bunch of things going on. For example, at Project Foundry, there are students, they've gone to school today and the teachers are there. They're expecting us to be there and work. So the kind of repetitive stuff that's needed in a company that's now starting to deliver has to be there as well. It can't just be, the fantastic, great idea, let's do something, to stretch the envelope. And transitioning an organization from not wanting to lose the spark, but also understanding that what pays the bills is delivering, every day. There's students who are logging on, their teachers are doing things right now while we're continuing to build a product, update it, and sell it to new customers. So it's in a different period of time. And so getting the different mindset, we're going through financial planning now and saying, look, here's the implications, looking at real projections, and we have real business, so we know how the levers work now. And so, we actually have a lot of information, but not just going by seat of the pants, who's going to call and order something today or whatever, but really starting to get a horizon looking this far out is hard to do. And we're not through it yet. We're still in a transition. So, Jay?
To Brian's point, I'd like to continue on that one a little bit of, are you mentally still, all of you, in the bootstrapping mode, even though you've raised money, you've got the product up, you've got customers? Do you look at yourself as now you're here, you are now a company, a business that's doing business, and you're part of our business society? Or are you just getting going in your mind?
Well, again, because of the nature of the market, we've been going for 11 years on April 1st, okay? So from that standpoint, this is a company and this business that has delivered and delivered successfully to tens of thousands of people, okay? So that's kind of weird, I get it, but from that standpoint, it's because of the passion and the desire of the people who were involved in the company, now ourselves included, that have joined Shane, that it's still here. And that sometimes happens, is what happened with Merge. I mean, there was no a reasonable person in the early days would say, this is ridiculous, why are we doing this? Will this ever happen? And Shane has gone through this, and we've all gone through it. But the business is accelerating. We're out in the world now. Camille and I have been at conferences, and others of our folks have been there, so we know that it's changing. Our activity is changing. We put systematic sales in place beginning of last year. So we've organized ourselves as a company, as opposed to a confederation of people who will do anything it takes to succeed. And that's what we're talking about. The difference is we're at the point that we know how it works. And now transitioning even our own thoughts, as Shane was saying, it's, oh man, will it ever be different? And the answer is yes, it will. But it's hard to see sometimes when you're in the middle of the transition. And it certainly wasn't Merge.
Well, in our customers, we've got historically, but 85% renewal rate for
Oh.
our software as a service, and actually it's a little more if you look in recent time. So it's not like we've been swinging, getting a base hit. I mean, we've been consistent over the years, and it's been a matter of putting these pieces in place. I mean, just a couple of years ago, in terms of sales, as soon as I get through the selling season for the summer, Becky and I would do the delivery, which would be training and going to trade shows, and so sales stopped for 3 months. Well, I mean, not really,
But close.
but close.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, the difference of baking cookies one oven at a time, or one of those ovens where it's always conveyor belt going, and that's the difference that you get. But that conveyor belt doesn't move at 100 miles an hour either. So that's that stage that we're at.
We've had as many, I think we'll tie this month, demos in January, okay? When in previous times you were busy doing other things when you were alone, but we've had as many demos as any other month last year. And that's because we have a sales group. We have 2 interns, and we have Ben DeBruy, he's doing all of the work that's needed to be done to really get out in the marketplace. Last week we were at a major education conference, and we're really the leader in doing what we're doing. It was at Harvard Business School in the School of Education, and we're recognized nationally as the leaders in doing this. And we have certainly served as many schools as anybody else has, and our competition is really different than we are, so we're differentiated. So, but we're still bootstrapping, transitioning at the same time.
And I think,
Yes, come
another point of talking about that move from bootstrapping to transitioning is, in the last year, we've hired people who are, they're people who have got significant achievement in their careers at this point.
Mhm.
So real people who've got real experience who come in knowing what to do, and the challenge of paying those kind of people, and the need to continue to stay ahead of that monthly, but the reality that we're not going to get where we need to go, if we don't do this. So this is the risk. It's this big gamble moment where, it's, Shane's talking about hitting a base hit, but if we're going to hit a home run, we are going to have to put everything behind it. So there's a lot of the psychology of this that it's not a place for risk-averse people.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
I came in a little bit late.
Mm-hmm.
Who's actually paying you? Where's your revenue source coming from?
Schools.
The schools, the district, or individual schools?
Individual schools and programs at this point in time, because
Just
this is
individual,
starting
okay.
to move through education. So some of them are, certainly we're just being paid now by a major urban eastern district to
Okay.
do this in 2 of their schools because they've got to do something, okay? So we're starting to get it. Again, that's part of the transition of the market, and the needs to sell to a district and what they need. We just got a contract from them because they didn't like ours. Well, it isn't quite right, but now we're dealing with people who have IT departments and legal who have to have contracts. So the whole level of what we're doing is starting to move up to a different thing, which is great, but we can't just do it by staying up till 11 every night and knowing that even though you're not the best QA person, you'll do it, or we'll do it, or whatever.
So you must have an understanding of your scalability then, of when your revenue is at such a level that you're self-sustaining and you're growing on your own. That's something that, obviously needs to come out so people understand, where do you need to be, and is it scalable once you get there? Or is it too
Absolutely.
labor intensive each step of the way that you're always looking for funding?
It's a great point, because, again, I personally have seen this, okay, and the discussions that we're going through with our strategic planning and so on is also to get all of our internal heads around the fact that, we got to organize ourselves for scalability. It isn't, we want to double revenue, we double the people. We want to triple it, we triple the people. That, of course, is, going to go like this, and it'll never be a sustaining business. So, even that mindset is something that has to change for our group, and is changing.
Well, and the other dynamic for us, so our customer acquisition costs, we recruit that within the first 9 months. And so there's, you know, that's going to change as we have, but we're also going to be charging more, having other services, so that actually reinforce retention, et cetera. But even having that good customer acquisition cost, the challenge that we face in our market is some of the cyclical nature of buying decisions. So somebody could be ready to buy September 1st, they may not be able to implement until, say, April 1st, no matter what we do. And we're doing things to mitigate that through teachers, et cetera, but that's a dynamic I feel like you don't get in a consumer, you know, a B2C kind of model, where, you know, do a Facebook ad and you see how 100 people act. Well, it's not the same buying process, at least with the school and program level. And again, we're trying to do things, we were doing things that we've done market experiments to mitigate that, but that is another reality of some of our scaling is if you don't hit at the right time, you know, the bus ain't gonna be there to pick you up.
So are you very customized for each school that you sell to?
It's easy to customize, though.
Or are you cookie cutter?
Well, the
Turnkey customization.
Yeah, the platform is configurable, and part of our process of professional development and onboarding is for people to make decisions about where they want to come down on student agency and other things that are related to education. Our major competitor for years has been a company, an organization that's built around one school model. We've had to serve over 200 schools that are coming from the same general direction, which is about students learn more by being engaged in doing things in the real world as part of the work that they do. But people have different opinions depending on their school. So Project I out in Muskego, which is doing quite well, or Kettle Moraine, the Global, they're different, and yet they're in the same area. So we've had to build something that was easy for us to configure, okay, and very quickly, so we could recover our costs, and the training and so on would be easy, but was able to fit the models that different people want to do, rather than saying, oh, I want to copy that school over here.
Right. So I'm sorry to monopolize a little bit, but I'll stop after this because I know there's other people who want to talk. What I guess I'm getting to on that cookie cutter, and your retention rate, you said, or your renewal rate, 80%?
85%,
85%. So,
historically since the beginning.
so is it feasible to allow trial periods where you don't have to worry about them getting funding, where they want to start in September, but they can't do it till April because they can't get approvals for things,
We start them with onboarding and training and other things early, but the reality is in most cases, the decisions are going to be made between April and October. And the rest of the year is getting people, keeping them in the funnel, things they're going to think about, but if they're in an operating school already, they're buried for the first part of the year simply because they're doing something else.
So there's an opportunity to introduce it as a trial vehicle where you're pretty sure it's going to work because you have good, you know, conversion.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
So anyway, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of how long you wanted to be in this phase before you got into it, and what was the catalyst?
Which, the transition phase or the bootstrapping? So that to have been about a month.
okay, well, you were at this company was going for 11 years, and then there was a certain point that you decided, okay, we need to move up, but I'm sure it didn't happen right away when you thought you wanted to do that, and then there was usually some sort of catalyst that happens to kind of make that. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm going to do it from the outsider's viewpoint because in 2011, in the fall of 2011, the non-value-added investor that Shane was talking about, and we knew Shane, I know about what he's been doing since 2009 and been trying to help, but that investor basically said, I'm not going any further, and here we are, we're in the middle of the year, and their school's operating. I mean, you know, one of the things that's different about this, or, you know, some cute little app like the Melon one that the GE ad has, if you've seen that, it's like, who cares? If it stops running, well, so be it. But we have school records of real people who are getting an education that if we weren't there, their schools wouldn't run. I mean, it's a hell of a responsibility, I mean, for a little teeny company. So it was like, what are we going to do? And so at that point in time, you know, at a specific luncheon I was with Shane, at that luncheon, I made the commitment that we're going to do this, needs to happen. So, you know, we've personally gone all in on it, but also we had to negotiate with the other investor. I mean, it's been a very difficult thing to do otherwise, but for me, that's kind of the catalytic event that started changing what this would become. In the beginning of last year, we pushed in the chips and said, all right, we got to build out sales really and other things that are needed and bring the development inside, because it's happening in the marketplace and we have to start building an organization.
Well,
So what do you see?
Well, there's like 3 events. I mean, the first couple years, I mean, for me, it was market research. It was the lean process. It was, is there something here? What is this product? And, and my mindset was, well, there might not be, whatever, young enough, no kids, who cares? I should be doing this.
You have 3 kids now, Shane.
I know, so that's, different.
Changes everything.
But, let's see, I don't have any pacifiers in my pockets today. But anyway, so that was the first phase. Then we got the kind of our second investor, and that was like, okay, well, we've got this thing, we're doubling the amount of schools every year. We've got these pockets. Now let's see if we can grow it, and and so then we went through that, and then became the phase of, well, hey, we proved we can do this. Now we got to kind of put some things on the line, and that's when the situation at Bill happened. So that's episode 2, and it was like, no, let's just keep this, like a mom and pop thing. And it was like, well, this is going to dry in the vine if we do that. So we sorted through that. Then generator was the next big thing. And generator, I think, the biggest, other than the skills we acquired by being part of that and refined, the biggest thing is we were able to attract talent. We basically got a big stamp of approval. And one of the hardest things, I think, is to find good people that have experience that you need to help kind of own a different piece of the thing. Not necessarily own the equity, but just like run with it, man. But whatever. You need, finding those people can be hard because if you're too early to start up, it's like, well, geez, I got stuff. Well, they might have kids, they might have other obligations. Or on the flip side, if you've been around, it's like, well, why the hell haven't they made it yet? What's going on? So generator was really the thing that allowed us to say, hey, God, there's something interesting here. This isn't just, something somebody thought up in a dorm room one night. So that was the third kind of stage for me, is that validation, that actually there is a business model here, there's some proven things, we've got real customers, real product, real reputation in the marketplace. That we could talk about all day, but until we went through generator, we didn't have.
A question for you on something that Camille brought up that kind of plays into what you were talking about. You said you transitioned to that hiring more experienced people. It's got a cost associated with it, but you normally see startups go in and they throw titles at people, and they have CIO, guy's never hardly written any code. So what did you do in that case as you started hiring these people that actually had experience in those particular titles? What did you do with the people that had those before? Were they able to transition to some of those positions, or did you kind of have to shift them out of the company, or did they shift themselves out, or did you just take a hat off?
Well, partly then, that's part of the answer. And frankly, as far as the transition, that was not easy to do as an organization. When you've done this, so there's things that the organization had to go through. Just think about it, Shane and a part-time person up north and contractors were the company for a long time. And now there are other people that are needed. And so even going through the mental shift from Shane's standpoint of, oh, they're going to do it differently than I did. And is this a good thing? How do I feel about this? This was mine. I got alone. I could at least screw up by my own decisions. Now I've got to collaborate with other people. So that was a big shift. But in the case of the people we hired, there were nobody doing those jobs other than people who were already there. So it was kind of easy.
Everybody had a lot of hats, and now they've just been separated.
Yeah, whatever the business card needed, we'd print those up. Wait a second. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. You a long time ago. Let's go over here for a second.
Sure. So it sounds like your early adopters took a pretty significant risk to come on with you guys. Our agency works with a lot of startups, and I'd love to hear about how you got your earliest customers over that hump and convinced them to purchase.
Well, my point of view, the thing was, it was, they were buying into me. And we have, in the early days, we have people that got grants that just handed it over. And without like a spec and say, here, this is what we want in return. And this is, I'm being somewhat narcissistic here, but whatever, I think it was that trust that not only the product, it's the Simon Sinek stuff, it's the why, is that, in terms of my passion was about really, trying to be a catalyst for change education. It was more about just sitting in your desk, filling out worksheets. And this idea of the whole person versus just, how good can you play Trivial Pursuit. So that really, drove me to be interested in this. And I was working with folk coming out of lockup and gang situations in this kind of methodology. So for me, it was very real. And I think that for the early people, it came through. And so I think it was like, well, we're in good hands with Shane. And that's got to be the only reason, because some of the product and some of the things they've lived through, there's no way in heck that if it was the product, they would be still here today. So anyway, that's a bit narcissistic, but I think it's also real.
Oh, yeah. And early adopters will put up with all kinds of things because, again, they had nothing. And in order to run, they had to have something because this is a very messy education method, and they were more focused on working with students than trying to be Google Doc ninjas or whatever. And so this was a godsend in the beginning as well. And in the education market, historically, 50% of your customers come from personal referrals, which can be augmented by social networking and other things, and we're trying to tap into that. But we saw that last year when we now are using Salesforce to actually track all this stuff, and yep, that's what's going on. About half of them are referrals.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just a follow-up question. Does that mean that most of your new customers don't have a solution right now, or are you replacing solutions now at this point?
Well, they either don't have it or they don't think they have it. So there might be some, like, say, Google Docs or Google Apps. You can do a lot with Google Apps, but if you're getting serious about trying to scale something, you go, well, I don't think we're just going to have everything in a Google folder, right? So, yeah, spreadsheets. So that's really where we fit well, is people that are trying to do what they're doing, look at like gradebooks and go, that they, in their mind, there is zero connection with that tool helping what they need to do. So there's that need that nothing else does this. From the IT departments and things like that, they treat it just like, a commodity. Well, that's just a learning management system. And so sometimes that can be tricky in the sales process. But for our people that are, wanting to and using it, it is a clear distinction. They don't have something like that.
Jake, for just a second, Mark's actually had his hand up for a long time.
So we have a lot of parallels for how we've been developing. I bootstrapped this thing for like 3 years, and fortunately was able to attract our VC funding, but it was only because I had the background in the industry that I was in. We didn't even have a product yet. We were like on a napkin with sort of like a kind of a prototype with wires sticking all out of it. And they required a full-time CEO when with part of their funding went to pay him to come aboard. Well, without that, we would have been nowhere because there's no way we would have attracted more funding without the team that we had. And then we outsourced everything because we only had a certain pool of money to work with, and the burn rate had to be really kept an eye on. And then we've been fortunate enough that we absorbed our 2 original programmers, which is the best thing we were able to do. But now that we're going after more funding, they look not even at the product, they're looking at the team. Because they know the product's good, we've got that down, the awards and all that stuff that we've done, but as we're moving forward now, it is all about the team we've built, and almost has nothing to do with the product. That just seems to be the way it is. But when you're saying the West and East Coast treat us differently, it is insane what happens on both coasts compared to what here. There's no way that you can do anything in the Midwest without revenue and recurring revenue and a ramp. They will ignore you every single day. And we've had doors, I got another door slam yesterday from a guy in Chicago that I thought was going to be so great. Oh no, we need about $5 million of revenue. Okay, well, we're still pre-revenue. Okay, have a nice day. So over and over and over. We're on the East Coast and West Coast. It's almost like they're willing to throw bundles of money in a fireplace without any idea what's going to happen to it.
There's been a lot of articles though about how the coast, that market is getting a little more timid. That they're actually starting to say, oh, burn rate isn't as important as actually someday making money. So the investor world on the coast must be getting a little scared of their dumb decisions.
It's amazing to me. It just feels like there's just, they don't, if you had any track record at all on either coast, you could raise $100 million with a napkin.
Okay, so an IPO that just happened a couple months ago along this line, company in Salt Lake City by name of Instructure. Their product is Canvas. It's more or less a traditional learning management system while all this education stuff is changing. They lost $100 million in the last 3 years, and they raised $45 million in their IPO. Okay, so, and you know, they got a lot of people and they're doing stuff. It's not that, but the idea is if we capture enough of the market, we'll somehow figure out how to recover that. There's also the greater fool theory that's at work probably as well, which is what happened in the late 2000s and continues to happen. Jake?
When you've gone to these trade shows, and even without the trade shows, have you gotten into, or what are your thoughts on resellers? Because that's, for a lot of my background in the school industry was years ago, but there were so many different resellers in the market that could really take a product if you...
Well, we're looking for other channels. So we think the closest thing to resellers in our space are educational consultants who have relationships with schools, who people are hiring, and quite frankly, we want to provide some of that too, that consulting, because people are looking for it. So people want to do change whatever, you know, they want to do it right, et cetera. So I think educational consultants are the closest thing. We're trying to find channels where they're in front of 100 people, they're in front of a school district. They're training them on the kind of methodology that our product would help support. If we can weave into their training and or figure out ways where it helps them be the better education consultant, we think there's a lot of wins there, because then, you know, we're talking about large districts. We're talking about 100 people at a time rather than onesie twosies. So that, at the moment, is where some of our hypotheses lie in terms of the reseller.
Have you talked to any resellers, or?
So I just talked with a reseller at Harvard who was there, and he was very interested in reselling our product. And I don't think we have a problem with that, but Shane points to the right thing, which is to use our product, teachers are moving to a new place in their methodology of teaching students, so that they're moving from a sort of sit and get model to the teacher becomes a facilitator, a guide, and the student begins to take more agency in their learning and begin to author things and build things and solve big problems, and so, or even little problems. And so when that change is happening, there's a need for support for that. So we're making a little pivot in our company right now. We have one organization, a school on the West Coast in Washington State that has hired us for consulting for 3 years to move them through this process. And they've paid us $110,000 to do that. Well, for us, that's real money. You know, and so it's like, okay, let me think here. Is the market ready for that? And it's very clear that the market is ready for the learning. And that really 5 years ago, the market wasn't ready for it. There were too few people and too little understanding about these new methodologies. But if you read anything about learning, you know that this stuff is what's being talked about right now. STEM, STEAM, makerspace, any of the kinds of things that are about the agency of children and making things. And we should take just a little bit more time with this.
Can I book in though what you said,
Yeah.
which is
And then here.
the consulting that we provided them, which was transitioning their organization to an entirely different way of doing it, has resulted in 2 years that students going from the lowest performing group in that cohort of schools, that's Bureau of Indian Education out there, to the highest performing in 2 years. And it's all about the kids. And the teachers aren't even as far as the kids are yet. And
Kids just get it.
kids get it if you give them the performance. Again, they're not just being drilled for the test. Spend half a day doing normal school and the other half of the day finding out why they want to be in school, okay, which is for all of the projects and things that they do. So.
Yeah.
So this begs the question, can you do a grassroots, like farming your own customer by offering a curriculum to incoming teachers that this is the way to teach? So that when they're getting ready to be an educator, they automatically think this way. I mean, do you work from that far back?
Well,
You have
part
to,
of
right?
our vision, and it's been for a while, is there's standalone teachers to that, either graduated with certifications. There's also all sorts of programs that if you're not a teacher but you want to become a teacher, you can get credentials in teaching. So there's all sorts of opportunities there. And so part of our standalone teacher subscription model is going to be a process that basically is like a cheerleader on your shoulder, a Jiminy Cricket, because people want to do this. Nobody wants to get up and talk to, 12-year-olds for 8 hours. There's something unnatural about that. So,
Tell me about it.
yeah. So they want to do something different, but there's this kind of the system's a little different, etc. So we think that is an opportunity for us to basically embed kind of some scaffolding, some first experiences, some examples, some models where, hey, you can do this.
Like project-based certifications?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and then there's other-
because again, isn't this ridiculous that most professional development, even for this type of education, okay, is done like this, okay? Like, let's take a Saturday or a couple days, and you sit there, and I will open your heads and pour things into you. Doesn't make any sense, does it? So
we're building this
we're
into our
building this
platform
also
right
into our
now
platform
as projects in our platform to sell that PD
as well.
as well. And then we need to go back and take our last question here
So-
before we free people.
What I was trying to determine, somewhere down the road, somebody has to have a track record to say the kids that went through this have actually become better employees or more employable. So are you tracking that piece of it? I mean, I know it's real early, but somewhere down the road, the people that hire them have to say, that was better than a kid that came out of the traditional.
We work with a bunch of networks of schools, which is another place we kind of get a lot of
And
referrals. Reseller. And those networks actually have, 10 plus years. They've done electrical studies. And they show that people that go through these schools actually go to post-secondary education more efficiently, so they're graduating sooner. They get into, jobs above what they're typically for what they would be kind of, on paper ranked in high school traditionally. A lot of those kids on paper in a traditional school would be, either the socially unawkward, really smart kids or on the other end of the spectrum. So, statistically they're doing much better than they would do just if they went to regular school, but they're even doing above that. So there's a lot of research that shows in terms of actually post-high school, a lot of success. Not to mention some of the, you see these stories all the time about the science fair, the person that finds some clever way to shovel snow by taking a weed eater, and putting some tires on them. You see all sorts of stuff like that, but then they're getting funding and they're more entrepreneurial. So there's a lot of case studies and a lot of this network research that shows that this is a very effective methodology. But there is a reality that sometimes you can't be half pregnant. So one of the challenges of people that implement this is it's like, well, we'll just tinker here, tinker there. And so that is something to be considered too, is the challenge of organizational change and changing methodology is just as real as if the methodology is good.
Now, in other words, an app doesn't solve the whole problem by itself. So one other thing, this one data point, I had this in middle school. I don't know whether there's any connection, but I do know that it made me different about my life. I don't know many people who've had that opportunity other than the schools that we're starting to serve and other things. So that's going to play out over the years, but it certainly changed my life, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this.
I guess the other data point would be that some of the software developers that we use went through this program and they run a business upstairs from us that we wish we were as profitable as they are. So, life is happening. Good things are coming from this.
So the question?
So the question is there anything that we in this community can do for Project Foundry? Don't hear that as self-serving at all.
I was going to ask the question.
That would have been good.
We're putting together our Series A round, but we still have a couple spots left in our seed round, and it sure would come in handy. So if you know people who are passionate as we are about education in this city, because I know it can be done here. Merge ended up being done in the Midwest. It can be done, but people have to step up, and we don't know everybody. So if you know somebody, introduce us to them, please.
All right.
Thanks very much.